Two men are charged with people smuggling after a group of migrants are rescued from the English Channel. 18 Albanians were crammed onto this boat, raising new questions over the security of our coastline.
I think it's a considerable worry both to any citizen like myself or even the government that we could see replicated mass migration across the Channel into this country.
Also tonight, as David Cameron campaigns to remain, a third Conservative MP suggests he may have to stand down. And the battle for Fallujah. Iraqi forces re-enter a key battleground in the fight against so-called Islamic State.
This is ITV News with Kylie Pentelow.
Good evening. Two men were charged with suspected people smuggling offences today after a boat carrying 18 Albanians had to be rescued off the Kent coast. Two children were among the passengers who are now at an immigration centre in Dover. The Home Office recently claimed Britain had one of the most secure borders in the world. But today there's been criticism of government cuts, which some say have left the border force unprepared for smugglers targeting our coastline. Sally Lockwood reports from Kent.
It's believed this is the boat that was rescued with 18 migrants on board being towed away by authorities. The suspected people smugglers who were with them are now in custody. Two British men in their 30s from the local area. A second dinghy recovered on the beach here yesterday is said to have also been carrying migrants who are now ashore. But authorities have not yet confirmed these reports. And there's growing concern over the border force's ability to protect our coastline.
I think it's a considerable worry both to any citizen like myself or even the government that we could see replicated mass migration across the Channel into this country. And what needs to happen is a system in France, in the Netherlands and in Britain that can both detect these boats coming across and also intercept them as well.
It's perhaps little surprise we saw UKIP leader Nigel Farage here today, quick to champion his views on Brexit with an audience of worried locals.
Here is a screaming cry for more resources for coastguards, but the really important thing isn't the policing of the waters. The really important thing is the message. And if the message is, if you come, you will be immediately returned, fewer people will take that risk.
It's unclear what will happen to the 18 Albanian migrants who were rescued here, but tomorrow new powers will be introduced to help target people smugglers. The Home Office says the UK already has one of the most secure borders in the world. But locals here who've seen a number of boats arriving in recent weeks say they don't feel safe. Seeking to reassure his constituents, their local MP is convinced staying in the EU is the right way forward.
This is the busiest shipping lane in the world. It is very heavily monitored and scanned, and additional resources were given last year by the Home Secretary to the Border Force for at-sea patrolling as well. So this is a priority area. It's an area where we need to have the resources to do the job. I think people are very alert to the risk that exists.
For now, the waters are calm here, but it won't take many more boats for this coastline to become a front line in the migration crisis.
Sally, just how worried are people that you've been speaking to about this incident?
Well, there's certainly an unease here. There is little in the way of any official numbers, but anecdotally, there are many locals who say they see boats like this being taken away every week by the authorities. One fisherman I spoke to earlier said he regularly sees dinghies abandoned on the beach in the early morning. And of course, the suspected people smugglers who've been arrested were from Kent. And there are some locals who don't want to talk publicly about their concerns for fear of repercussions. But whatever the worry here about migrants arriving by boat on the south coast, the Home Office is citing this as an isolated incident.
Sally Lockwood, thank you. A third Conservative MP has suggested David Cameron may have to step aside as Prime Minister. All three want the UK to leave the EU. But today, Mr Cameron was on the campaign trail, urging people to vote to remain. Well, our political correspondent Lewis Vaughan-Jones was there for us. Lewis, did Mr Cameron address these calls to stand down?
Unsurprisingly, no, he didn't mention it. And us journalists who were there were actually told we weren't allowed to ask him any questions, so we will have to wait to hear his views. The rally, though, did expose some of the unusual things about this campaign. David Cameron sharing stage with Labour's new Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Now, just a few weeks ago, he was saying some pretty unpleasant things about him. Things a bit different now, though.
You've got the Labour Mayor of London. You've got the Conservative Prime Minister standing together because we say this matters so much for our country.
So, Lewis, who is it that's come out against the Prime Minister today?
Well, Bill Cash, Conservative MP, quite a well-known outspoken critic of David Cameron and Eurosceptic. He's been criticising the way the Prime Minister's handled this campaign, and he wants it to change. He says if it doesn't change, there may well be a need for a vote of confidence in the leader after the referendum.
The voters deserve better than this. The voters are having the first opportunity in a generation to be able to make a decision about this monumental question: do we stay in the European Union or do we leave it? And they deserve far better than the scaremongering and misleading propaganda.
So Bill Cash's words there, perhaps spoken more in hope than expectation, but this campaign really is exposing the divisions that this campaign's creating.
Lewis at Westminster, thank you. The Duke of Edinburgh is unwell and will be forced to miss an engagement tomorrow on doctor's advice. The palace says Prince Philip has reluctantly agreed not to attend a commemoration of the Battle of Jutland in Orkney. His engagements later in the week are expected to go ahead as planned. And the Taxpayers Alliance has called for a new tax on sugary drinks to be scrapped, saying it will hit the poorest families hardest. But the Treasury insists it's a major step forward in the fight against childhood obesity. Now, the Iraqi army re-entered the city of Fallujah today, which has been held by the so-called Islamic State for more than 2 years. Iraqi soldiers went into the city from 3 directions just before dawn. Street fighting continues tonight, raising fears for around 50,000 civilians who it's thought have been unable to flee. Duncan Golestani has the latest on the battle.
This is an all-out assault to retake Fallujah in the air and on the ground. The Iraqi army is now advancing inside the city, which so-called Islamic State has held for 2 years. The troops have advanced from various points against extremists in Fallujah, this commander says. God willing, we will continue with our progress. The battle for the city is fast becoming one of the biggest ever fought against IS. The Iraqi army is backed by Shiite militiamen with air cover from the American-led coalition. Close to the Iraqi capital Baghdad, Fallujah is strategically important. But retaking the city has symbolic value too. Its capture in 2014 was Islamic State's first significant victory. Its suicide bombers are still killing Iraqi civilians. There were 3 attacks in Baghdad today, which left 20 dead and many more injured. So the Iraqi government, with help, is determined to push back. While the forces are stacked against IS militants, any victory will be slow and bloody. Past battles for Fallujah have been costly for all sides. Duncan Golestani, ITV News.
Sport, and Alistair Cook has become the first Englishman to reach 10,000 test runs. He's also the youngest batsman ever to reach the milestone, which he achieved as his side beat Sri Lanka in the second test at Chesterley Street. And AFC Wimbledon have won promotion to League One with a 2-0 victory over Plymouth. Wimbledon started as a non-league side just 14 years ago after the original club moved to Milton Keynes. Now both clubs will be in the same division. And that's all for now. I'll be back at 10 with all the latest developments, but from all the team here, have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.